Hey,
Hi, good afternoon.
how are you? You okay?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thanks. It's been too long, Kim.
Good. I know it has. Good to see you.
Hi, Adrian. Hi, T.
Hello, hello.
Good morning, afternoon.
Good morning. Lyndon was just doing a great session, so we've allowed him to run over a little bit, I believe.
I was in it. It was amazing.
Yeah, and he's on his way, but yeah, really, really cool. It was a little bit like listening to my data team. Hi, Lyndon. That was like listening to my data team. Just awesome. They're always telling me that there's just so much cool. I'm going to create cool shit that they could do. The difference is that I end up having to pay for it. So, Lyndon, I don't know if you can hear us yet. Can you just stick a thumbs up if you can hear us? I think Lyndon's eyebrows are saying that he can't hear us.
I think the people online can.
Yeah, everyone online. Amy Beth, thank you. Alan, can you hear Lyndon?
We can hear Lyndon. He just can't hear us.
Okay. Mr. Walker.
Hey, I can't hear anything. I'm sorry.
Alan, can I leave you to see if you can sort Lyndon out, and I'll
pop out and try to go back in.
Yeah, super. Alan, if you could sort out Lyndon, we can start the panel session, and then hopefully he'll be able to come in and join us shortly. Cool. Okay, so everybody, thanks very much. We ran this morning's panel session, and we tried to do it without moderating it, and I'm not sure it worked that well. So I'm going to try and moderate this one. So this afternoon is the art and science of talent intelligence and lessons. I should say lessons learned. There's a bit of a typo in there. And I just thought, actually, as we've listened to this morning, I don't know how many people have had an opportunity to listen to some of the sessions, that actually, if we hi, Lyndon, if you can come back in, that would be fab. Alan will let you in. Then I think if we start with lessons learned and then we get to the art and science of TI, because actually what that really lends itself to is what is the possibility for the future. And I think that is super exciting. Lyndon, can you thumbs up if you can hear me? Yay! Okay, so I just did some filling, Lyndon. You've missed nothing. So let's start out a little bit with lessons learned. And this needs to be an interactive conversation. But Toby, can I start with you so that the others have got some time to think, right, and generate some thoughts? So if you were doing it again, what would be the things you wouldn't do?
Oh, things I wouldn't. I was thinking, what would I do if I did differently? So I'm going to do what I did differently. Because I can't think what I wouldn't do. Actually, no, I know both. If I was doing it again, I'd be more aggressive. And what I mean by that is, I think the more I'm in this space, the more I realize the work is there for the taking. The business want this stuff. There's a demand for this stuff. I think I probably played it a bit too safe, and I was trying to grow organically in line with capacity. So I'd push a bit, get capacity, push a bit, get capacity. And I'm still kind of do that a little bit too much, if I'm going to be honest. If I was starting from scratch, there'd be a tendency now to go, I wonder what it would be like if I just went all out, made the business feel the pain of lack of capacity and let them then cross fund and build that capacity back up, but go out and show everyone all the toys that are available. Which I'm still nervous to do now. Like I still have the premise of tap on a VP's door and that you can't support them. They're not going to open the door for you again. But I do wonder if that's actually a more aggressive and a more successful way of growing functions faster. And I'd say the other thing I'd say is I'm not bad at asking for headcount. I'm badgering bosses till they give in generally for headcount, or they fire me, one or the other. But I'd say hire as high level as you can. I'm a big fan of getting people up and developing them through, and I want that succession in teams and everything else. But there's definitely something to be said for hiring more senior folks and then having it as part of their roles to push out and do that expansion as well. So you get everyone expanding out rather than just single points of contact expanding out. And we definitely saw that, at Philips, you see some of the awesome leaders that have come through, but it took us 5 years to get to that point. And they were doing some awesome work during that 5 years. But I'd say, yeah, I'd probably overhire, and I'd probably be more aggressive.
Does that relate to everyone else, Adrian? What do you think? You is that resonating?
Yeah, absolutely. Just for background, I was at Amazon doing a lot of this work 2017, 2018, and I think to Toby's point, we started small, but we had a gift of leadership that saw the vision, and we got some big head count. And then when I started, we were small. It was me and one or two other people, but we hired an economist and a data scientist. And actually, the data scientist was Ben Hannawell, who was on here. And so there's a balance though. Like we had economists, and I think we talked about data before, where we came in and we was like, oh, what we really needed was a data engineer, not a data scientist, and not an economist necessarily, because I'm an economist sorting spreadsheets. That said, we were able to shoot a lot higher. Like we were developing an enterprise-wide problem statement and writing a paper that was kind of basically enterprise and global for all of Amazon, and having to just validate Toby's point, having people who thought in those really kind of mega concepts helped us distill down to a paper that when we delivered that paper, like, people's minds were blown. They're like, we can't even do this yet. I mean, it was, we were talking about concepts of agglomeration and transforming cities and stuff like that. And so I couldn't agree more. I think it goes to fluency and your confidence and just really doubling down. I think even this conference is telling us that there's a lot of people who know this space, and I think probably to a person, even though all these folks, I think two people, Kim and Lyndon, who have not met, I think we would all say that like this information is very critical to the evolution and growth of companies, regardless of economic and global circumstances, and there's just more work to be done. So I would agree with Toby, and I was able to see a little bit of that. Last thing I'll say is I think the balance is even when you go big early, I remember saying this and then seeing it even now today. People were like, well, when are we going to know that this is taking place? I go, we won't know for 3 years, 3 to 5 years. And so now, that 3 to 5 years has elapsed, and we've seen that the work we did result in sort of inorganic growth of cities we recommended to grow in, more than their peers, more than peer cities. And so like, oh, now I get the luxury of looking back and go, oh, it worked. But you don't always you may not be there. I'm not there anymore. I don't get to see that every day. So it's a long game, but I couldn't agree more that you just have to go and push and be very fluent and persuasive on the importance of the work.
And there's something, isn't there, about the cost of a stupid decision? It's kind of like you can't put a value on the cost of a stupid decision. And actually, if you did, and then you started talking to business leaders about what those dollar signs look like, then they'd never make a decision again. So there kind of has to be a balance. Kim, Lyndon, I'll come to you in a second, but because I love one of your learnings. Kim, what's going through your head as you're thinking about lessons learned?
I think for me, it goes back to actually Lyndon's presentation. I wanted to comment, and then I thought, I'll just wait until this panel. It's not just who's your client, but who is your client's client and who are the stakeholders, right? And so I think for me, that was a big learning early in my career, working on projects and thinking, okay, I'm solving the problem. They asked a question and I'm solving their problem. And it very quickly became a much broader ask because more people were pulled in. So now it's about anticipating who else is going to see this, who will actually take this data, potentially represent it in a way where I'm not there. How will that be carried through? So to me, I think my biggest learning, and I don't know that I would do it differently, but if folks are, setting something up now, I think thinking about the question behind the question or the client's client, those are things to me that have been really impactful.
Lyndon, I was listening to you and thinking it was a little bit like listening to a supplier, the way that you work, which I just thought was really cool and really interesting. I had a message from our head of data going, I love Adrian and I love Lyndon. Said sprint, roadmaps, data engineers. I want more and more was what it actually, it's just like, oh my God. But actually, I think, lessons learned from you in that journey would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think some of the lessons learned from us were, I talked about previously that continual mindset. I love coming to the table with no but, right? Like, as an example, earlier this year, they asked, hey, could you do a deep dive? Can you do this? Can you go more granular than an MSA, right? And the answer was like, no, I don't think so. And I was like, wait a second, that's a missed opportunity here. That's a gap. And I was like, no, but I'll work on it. And at a later point in time, like more recently, we did this incredibly in-depth deep dive that goes sub-MSA. Like for the nerds in here, I'm thinking, you know, Ant-Man, we went quantum, we went subatomic, right? And we went into the going to the county level. We looked at competition at the county level. We created isochrome maps to get distance that people are going. So the continual mindset of no but, because that instead of just going with a single hard binary yes no, completely shifts the conversations. And the lessons learned is that creates partnership, it creates trust, and it creates like the stakeholder buy-in that you need to go and build an empire like Toby's talking about.
I think I love that. I've never done the no but I'm a big fan of the yes but. So I'm going to really definitely pick up that no but, because I often say to the teams, and saying no is really hard when people are trying to pick up work and build functions, build up relationships. Saying no is really hard. So I often say to the teams that if you can't say no to something, say yes, but yes, we can do it, but it needs to be pushed out in terms of later date, or yes, we can do it, but we need more resources. Yes, we can do it, but we need to change the scope, whatever it may be. But I really like that idea of no but as well, because it's just always having that mindset of there is something we can do. Because we've got a buying signal from the customer internally that something's needed. So you've got the buying signal. It's how can we frame a solution here? So I really like that.
I think what's really great about that too, Toby, just to chime in there, it allows for partnerships that may not have been there organically initially, right? And so I think too, some of the projects we've been asked to do, my immediate gut is, well, I don't have access to that data, or that's something that sits with someone else, or that's somewhere, there could be a partnership there. And so I think back to some of the best projects that we've done, or the most impactful projects, they came from where we questioned whether we could, and then we started bringing other folks along and making this kind of collaborative journey. And that wouldn't have happened if we just said no. So, it's always best to just take the opportunity and see where it leads. I totally agree.
And I'm going to use that as a segue in a minute, but I just want to make sure that we're picking up on some of the stuff in chat and in Q&A first of all. So Heather, a great friend of mine. Hi, Heather. Fab to have you here. Do you think going forward your teams will require different skill sets? So Lyndon's going to say, I need more data engineers and I need more data scientists. Adrian. You're still on mute. Sorry, you'll need to hit a button, Adrian, because you're still on mute.
I was looking at the Q&A. Sorry, give me the last portion of that question.
No worries, it's all right. I can come back to you if you like and give you time to think about it. So if you think going forward, is your team likely to need different skill sets to what you have now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the skill sets, Toby and I have talked about this even as we connect personal level, like very few of us knew that 5 years ago that we would be doing that our work today would look like it does, right? And so I think to a person, you have to ask yourself, did you anticipate your work would look like this 5 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago? So I think it's just we're constantly evolving, what we need, and then more importantly, how we use those skills, in terms of the data science and economist kind of headcount. And again, Amazon had kind of a bias towards hiring economists, but in terms of the broad skill set, yeah, I think you're just always evolving the way you develop those skill sets, and then how those skill sets are putting themselves to use in the content area. I to the point of no but and yes but, we had a similar saying that was like, we don't know all the answers, but we're trying to ask all the questions. Like internally, we were thinking, what's the possible thing they're asking? To Lyndon, to your point, I loved when you said MSA and then learning the alternatives in international markets, right? The metropolitan statistical area isn't the same like in Amsterdam. It's called the Randstad, and like how you looked at expanding demographic areas was really important, and how you got fluent in those areas. Another point on that is on the skill sets is thinking about, we call it segmentation. For the places where we had a huge presence, the Silicon Valley is a great example. People would say, oh, well, the Silicon Valley has X amount of, the MSA has X amount of SDEs, software development engineers, but certain amount of them were on the east side. And so when you segment, like, but nobody would travel that. Same in New York. I'm sure there's place in London, other places. So you're like, no, you have to micro segment your actual market based on what people are willing to travel. Then COVID occurs, and now we have to be agile and fluent in our topics. And we say, okay, now maybe we can go even further out than we thought. So anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I think the skill sets are ever evolving. And the most important thing is like the growth mindset of anticipating what your customers are going to need and staying curious and just pushing the envelope. And back to Toby's point about just being bold, asking for headcount, you really have an opportunity to exceed the boundaries of where the business sometimes thinks.
Toby, that links in, I think, to the conversation you and I had about maybe doing a session, which we're not going to do this time around, but we might do it next time. And it links into Safali's question, which is about how do we remain consultative in nature? And you talked about, do in-house teams need sales functions and account management functions? Do you want to expand on what you were thinking about?
I think they do. Yeah. So we have one. We're not allowed to call it business development. That was deemed too aggressive. So we have customer enablement, but it's exactly the same. It's around running pilots with different internal stakeholder groups, and then off the back of the pilot, then looking to secure funding for headcount for our growth. So yeah, we actively have that, and that's part of the account manager role, is to develop out the account, secure new headcount, etc. So I do see it as essentially as an internal external company. It's an internal company. We've got a comms function, we've got a biz dev function, we've got the account management, the customer success teams. You've got the kind of agile intelligence support team that runs across everything. We're not as evolved on the data engineering, business intel engineering side as we should be yet. But yeah, for me, I think having that pure BD role, I've tried to get one for many years within different teams, and yeah, this is the first time I've managed to get anything like that approved. But I'm super excited by it. I think it's really needed, and I think it's almost being an internal evangelist around TI. And we spoke earlier about how so much of this role is educating stakeholders and re-educating stakeholders. So I think that kind of internal evangelist / sales role is really important.
Can I jump in on that? I feel like that's incredibly powerful. And you know, I had a conversation the other week with some senior leaders. We were working on a project, and I was like, hey, what do you think of the model? And his response was like, you know, if not for this project and the other project, like I would have never known you guys exist. And you guys are fantastic. You know your stuff. Like, this is amazing. I almost feel like you kind of like, you know, you need like a roadshow and you need to showcase this. And that's where I kind of like shriveled back and I was like, I'm a scientist. I don't want to do sales, you know, but I think it's important to have someone selling and cheerleading the work and doing that. You know, if you don't do it yourself personally and getting that to scale to help, you know, really drive your impact and get like buy-in and really get, like you said, Toby, get drum the support for the added resources, right? So that's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's really key. That's something that, you know, I've pretty much worked on really only smaller teams. So we haven't had the luxury of a dedicated kind of sales consultant. We've just kind of been that ourselves, but that does marry to the other question of, you know, what skills may you need in the future, right? And it also just goes to the versatility of hiring in these roles, and, you know, the transferability of different skills that folks bring, I think, to this function. You do have the data scientists, you do have the sales folks people, but just like you, Lyndon, I've been in situations where someone heard about us somewhere and reached out, and they're, you know, I had no idea we had people that did this work. This is amazing. And then it just is an organic find, which is really cool. We've done the road shows, we've done those types of things. It works, but I think a learning in that is that the business doesn't speak the TI language. And so a road show's, it's great. But it is also a show me function, right? Where we kind of have to get in there and show them exactly what we're doing, what the impact is, why this matters. You know, and I think that's kind of the differentiator between the roadshow and then actually having that organic conversation of, oh, I didn't know you existed. How can you help me?
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to jump in, Lyndon, to your point. I was the mouth, if it's not evident already. And I remember being very clear with when I hired scientists. I was like, do you want to come to this meeting? I want to bring you in case they ask questions. So like, again, economic concepts or what we did with the data. If there's any, you know, math equations. and they'd be like, no, I don't want to go. And they would so it was just an interesting balance. Like, I think in the comment, find an extroverted champion. Like, I was that person. And then sometimes my team would be like, stop going to meetings, like you're generating too much attention, like we can't keep up with it. I'm like, sorry, my boys are getting ready to go to school here morning in the West Coast, but and so it was really interesting balance. But I think that was what made such great dialogue and such great team, is I was kind of ideating and saying this is what people want, and science team was like, oh, I love that, I want to do that, and then sometimes it was too much. So I think it goes to even building your internal team and having this balanced skill set, and kind of corny version is, let people soar with their strengths. But I think, there's a way to do that where you're out there, to Kim, to your point, you're out there, gaining that and surprising people and anticipating what they need. And then that's how I think that flywheel starts to work, is you have science people innovating in the background and building as we're going, and people on the other side out there, to Toby's point about business development, generating interest and kind of surprising people. And I think that combination can be really powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's where I could see most functions gaining most benefit. It's like the economies of scale piece. If the same as, if you hire a salesperson, the whole job is about billing in new business, so you're going to grow more. It's like the biggest return on investment you're going to get. And I think the two areas I think most teams don't necessarily invest into, obviously the sales that we just discussed, and comms. Comms is, even if you're not landing, and we still get the biggest feedback point I get on negative feedback point on it, all on Net Promoter Score pieces, is this works amazing, we just didn't know you existed. And we send a newsletter out to 20,000 people a month. And yet we still get that. We still get, this is amazing, we didn't know you existed. And we're always going to get that, because you can't, even if you're emailing people, even if it's newsletters, even if you do podcasts, you're still going to get pockets that don't know you exist. But it's to your point, Adrian, it's about getting out there. And then the comms bit is kind of your drip feed. But then it's, all right, now you're kind of a warm connection rather than a cold call. And now kind of work out what that mechanism is. How do I make this a regular thing? And to Kim, your point, rather than it being a one-off and a piece of work, is how do I build this mechanism to make it more structured and stable? We've got a few minutes left for final question. I know we've spoken probably more heavily on the science side of TI, and Lyndon, your presentation was awesome, by the way. I'm definitely really watching it, because it was so much in there and it was so much good stuff. I'd love to know more about the art. And Adrian, you made me think of it with your comment around going sub-level, sub-MSA. And you think, well, quite often it's the art of knowing what to look into in a city. What's the local coffee shops like? What is the commute like for commuting belt, etc. Talk to me about kind of the art side of TI and what that means to you. So Kim, if I could throw it to you first.
Yeah, so to me, it actually is more of the storytelling. When I think of the art of it, I think of, we have the data and the resources and the platforms, and we're synthesizing all of our information. We're putting these amazing presentations together, and we get ready to deliver that. And you can have the best information in the world, as accurate as it can be, right? It's never 100%. And you go in and you're telling that story to someone who didn't pull it, who was asking a question that may not actually be the final question. And so to me, the art of TI isn't necessarily always the data pulling, it's actually delivering what you've pulled, and being able to do that in a way that resonates with that individual. Again, knowing the clients. And I think at the end of the day, anticipating what questions they may have so that you can be prepared for that, and knowing that at any given point in that presentation, they'll question it, and you have to be prepared to stand up for that, because I think that's not something a lot of folks are comfortable with necessarily, and that comes with time and presentations. I definitely wasn't in the beginning, and now I would be surprised if I wasn't challenged in a meeting. I should be. I think to Lyndon's point earlier with the academia, right? Like that's something that just happens. And so to me, the art of TI is more the storytelling of the data.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. Lyndon, what's your take?
So I've got first, let me say that science is art. So, I lead with that. But, when I think about it, right, I think art is context, right? And, when you say, like, what is the art of TI? And to me, the art of TI it's the context. Like, what is knowing that there's a peninsula here, what is the context that I need to know? I need to know geographically that's a peninsula. And unless someone like is Aquaman and is going to swim across the bay, they're not commuting across that. Like, we're not going to pull that talent over here, right? What's the context? So it's then, knowing how to ask the questions to get the right context. I think that's the big part of the art. And getting to, addressing the challenges is part of the fun part of the art, right? Like I tell the team, like, I love being challenged and I love controlling narratives, right? Like, if someone's going to say, like, I know they're going to ask the question for the salary, right? The salary's off. So I'm going to put this up front and I'm going to control it. I'll preempt, I'll ask the question. So the art is, again, getting the context, knowing that they're going to ask about this and pushing it out front so that it's before they can challenge you on it, you're bringing it up and driving that conversation. So context and science is art.
Yeah, I think context is a hugely important one, and it's often overlooked. And that's my fear when we're talking about kind of the evolution of the BI side of things and kind of HR people analytics to self-service and dashboarding and tooling. That's always my fear is, yes, you have some really good data points then, but you might lose the context of those data points. And that's always a fear in terms of the evolution. But Adrian, what's your take?
Yeah, Lyndon, that's a great handoff. I agree. Again, not as a scientist. I think remaining curious and almost like a curator of art is like also the extroverted leader has to have a really deep understanding of how to use it and to whom you're speaking. One of the things that we found, and again, my context was very much in the enterprise level location strategy in cities, but we did so much desktop research. And then we had the opportunity, which if anyone can do it, if you're talking about recommending places, which again, post-COVID is less of a thing now, but to go to a place and see that place and interact with people from that place and people from the universities and people from tech hubs and innovation places. I mean, there were entire cities that all the math and all the science told us this was the place. And then we went there and said, this isn't quite the place we thought, and vice versa. Places that didn't look as perfect when we went there had all these kind of qualitative and anecdotal and just things that made it just more sticky. And so I think you can't that's almost, again, just a foregone conclusion, but like everything needs to be a balance of art and science is art, and they're deeply interwoven. And part of this is becoming just very fluent and comfortable in those discussions, particularly if you have to convince leaders who don't have any idea of this space and you're dropping all of this on them in a 1 hour meeting or in one paper. You just have to be prepared to speak about it in any direction that they go and dispel myths about entire countries, or entire cities. And so I think, it's just really embracing that and embracing all the other factors that influence how we think about people, where they move, where they work, how they're employed, and how countries and companies, merge and show up in different locations.
Well, do you know what? I was going to go to Q&A after this, but that was such a good answer. I'm going to leave it on that. I'm not going to go to Q&A at all. So as it ticked over 15 minutes, perfect timing as well. That was an awesome way to finish. Really, really loved it. Thank you all so much. Alison, I know you're in chat. I hope I did your bit okay and I didn't drop the ball too much. We're off to the next sessions now, which is super exciting. So everyone jump onto the sessions button on the left-hand side. We're going to have Fran Walsh from Kimberly-Clark talking about integrating TI into the business. And Adrian, once again, from Remitly, how location strategy intersects with TI. So 2 awesome sessions. Thank you all so much for this chat. And yeah, look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thanks all.
Thank you.